Story. Once upon a time, um, time. So the OSP gave me a story, right? It's called the Garden of Absolutely Not Eden, right? Um, it's like an action adventure, right, with a twist, essentially. So I wrote it down so that I don't like, so that we can be quick with it, number one, and so that we can time essentially. So let's just go. So the story starts with the protagonist. Her name is Claire, Claire. I think that's how you spell it. Okay, cool. So Claire is she's originally from Portland, Oregon, but she moved to Miami, right? So when she got to Miami, she's like 19 years old, right? Let's make her 21. She's 21 years old, and she works at a McDonald's in Miami, like a drive-through McDonald's in Miami. Um, so one day during the summer, right, midsummer essentially, um, a couple drive through, and they're like in their 70s, and they they want to buy stuff from McDonald's, obviously. So Claire's serving them, and they proceed to have some small talk. And Claire's like, "Where are you guys from?" And they're like, "Oh, they are from Russia." Like she's like, "Where in Russia?" They're like Yakutsk, like the coldest village in the world, right? And Claire was like, "Oh wow, like I didn't know that, right?" So they proceeded to have a lot of small talk, and then one thing led to the other, and then the couple ended up like inviting Claire over, right? They said that they are they don't have a child; it's just the two of them, and they're always bored. And if Claire would like to come to Yakutsk, they won't mind funding, an all expense paid trip to Yakutsk, essentially. Um, Now, Claire obviously was over the moon. First of all, she couldn't believe what she was hearing, and then secondly, she was over the moon, right? And then our boss was just like overhearing the whole conversation too, right? Our boss was like obviously very overjoyed. So while Claire was still like trying to debate if she should like if this was even real at all, right? Our boss was like she could totally have like 3 weeks off because Claire was like this very hardworking staff, right? She was always the first to resume in the morning, always the first to close at night. Kind of like my brother, very hardworking. Okay, cool. So Claire, right? Okay, cool. So where was I? So our boss gave her like permission to like close some work, right? Okay, cool. So 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 this was on the first of like August 2028. The story is set in the year 2028, right? Um, let's make it 2028, just for fun. Okay. So the story is set in 2028. This was on the 1st of August 2028. 1st of August 2028 is not midsummer, but you catch my drift. Okay, cool. So 1st of August 2028. 8th 2028. You get it. Okay, cool. So our ticket to Yakutia was for the 4th, right? So she rushed home, she packed her things, and she barely could like sleep from the 1st to the 4th. So finally the 4th came, and she flew to Yakutsk, and the couple were there to meet her at the airport, the whole nine, and he drove her to like this small, very cold, very icy, 2 bedroom, secluded bungalow in Yakutsk, right? So it was late when they got there. It was around 1 a.m. when they got to this creaky old apartment, right? Very cold too, by the way. Did I mention it was extremely cold? So when they got there, Claire was showed her room. Obviously, her room was the other room because it's just a 2 bedroom, right? So the couple took one room, which was their normal room, and then Claire was put in the spare room essentially. So she couldn't sleep. She couldn't because she couldn't still believe what she was seeing because like she had never even been out of the United States before. The only state she had ever traveled out of was like Oregon. She had never been on a flight before. This was like her first time, and everything happened so quickly she could not even wrap her head around it. So she was super excited. So even in the Yakult, she was still pinching herself. She couldn't sleep. I know I'm speaking very fast, so feel free to like slow this down if anybody ever listens to this. I'm sorry. Okay, cool. So she proceeded to um so she couldn't sleep essentially. She could not sleep. Like she was so excited she could not sleep. So in our awakened state, right? She noticed on the wall that there were like a lot of photographs on the wall, and it was the same guy. It was this 21-year-old ish guy, um, and it seemed as if the room was like his room, right? So in the morning, right? Again, she proceeded to have some small talk with like the couple, and then she asked them about the photos of the person on the wall, right? The pictures on the wall, and then the couple, they started crying profusely, and then they came clean to her, and they were like, "Oh, we're sorry, we lied to you. The other day in Miami, we told you that we didn't have a child. Well, we lied. We used to have a child. His name is Dimitri. The room used to belong to him." And then Claire was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. What happened to Dimitri?" Because obviously they were crying. Something bad must have happened to Dimitri. So they gave her like the whole spiel that Dimitri was like, at the age of 21, Dimitri was like diagnosed with cancer, and he was essentially given a few months to live, right? And and then they were just saying and then she was like, "And what?" And he died or something. That it's okay if he died. And they were just saying and then she was like, "Why are you just saying and? Say what you want to say." So they were like, "Okay, there's a secret that she has to keep, right? And she must never divulge that secret to anybody till she dies, right? Can she keep a secret?" And they were like, if he ever mentions that secret to anybody, that they'll find out that they work with the Soviets, with the KGB and everything, that they'll find out. That can she keep a secret? And she was like, okay, she thinks she can keep a secret. So they were like, okay, cool. That they're in Yakutsk, right? And Yakutsk is like supposed to be one of the most northern, in the North Pole essentially. It's one of the coldest villages in the world. That when you go past the Yakutsk a little bit, right, there's actually a jungle that is about 7 times the size of Russia, right? It's like the Amazon forest essentially, but it's like 7 times the size of Russia. And that's very big because Russia technically is like the biggest country in the world. So imagine Russia, but times 7, right? So that jungle, right, is actually the jungle that houses the famed biblical Garden of Eden, right? So that's what the Garden of Eden essentially is. But the problem with that jungle is that the jungle is so dense. The jungle is like it has trees that it's a very weird jungle. It has trees that are like, okay, the Garden of Eden is in the middle of that jungle, right? But before you could get to the Garden of Eden, you have to first cross the jungle. Now the problem with crossing the jungle is that, again, the jungle has all these like 600 to 700 feet tall trees, right? And the trees are so tall, the canopy is so dense that there's no lidar or radar or sonar that can penetrate the canopy. On top of that, the jungle has this weird, there's gravity, right? So like the female version of gravity, the yin to the yang of gravity, which is like ether, right? So the jungle has this thing called ether that it's like this source of energy that like kind of like protects the jungle, right? And that energy prevents anybody from like anything that goes into the jungle doesn't come out. It just disintegrates, right? So man or machine, try to go inside the jungle, it just disintegrates. So nobody has actually ever been there. Nobody knows what is inside there. But from aerial, space, aerial photographs from satellites in space, they know that, okay, that is actually where the Garden of Eden was moved to. But nobody has ever been there. NATO, the United Nations, America, the KGB, everybody has tried to go inside that garden, but to no avail. Okay, cool. So the reason why they are telling her is because, well, Dimitri, after he was like diagnosed with cancer and was given a few months to live, made up his mind that, well, there was no harm in trying. Nobody had ever made it out of the jungle, but he was so convinced that there was a cure in the jungle for him, right? That if he could like step into the Garden of Eden, that maybe not the tree of life, but he will find one tree that at least will have like a fruit that will magically cure him, essentially. So he decided to like, play a trick on his parents. So on his birthday, on his 21st birthday, actually, right? He told his parents that he wanted some ceviche and some burek and some venison. Odd combination, right? So his parents were like, okay, that they can't. So essentially his favorite meal, but they couldn't get the meal in their tiny village in Yakutsk. So they had to like go to like a neighboring village to get it, right? I'm sorry, I'm narrating this thing poorly. I have like a post of this on Medium and Substack where I think I kind of like wrote it better. Okay, cool. Sorry, let's just get back to it. So essentially he tricked his parents out. So when they came back with venison and with the burek and everything. They discovered that they met his absence essentially. He actually had escaped. Where had he gone? He left a note behind. He explained his predicament to them that, look, he couldn't just sit around and wait for the cancer to come and claim his life, that he had to take his chances, and that he had gone into the jungle, and hopefully he was going to make it to the Garden of Eden and get the fruit and come back, right? And then so that was essentially what happened. And then couple started crying again, and then they were like, "Oh, it's been 7 years since he has gone," and pretty much he met the same fate that literally everything that has attempted to enter that jungle encountered, which is, well, they don't make it out alive, right? Yeah, so that's it. So that's it for that, right? So they started crying and all that. So, but what do I say in all these things, right? Claire was like very, very. She was so excited on the inside, right? But she had to like feign. She had to feign empathy. So she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She even cried midway. She's actually a very good actor, right? So she even cried midway just to like gain the sympathy of the, just to pretend as if she was cognitive empathy, essentially, like to pretend as if she was like empathizing with the couple, right? So the couple were like, okay, but deep inside her, right, she was excited because she felt that, wait, this is like destiny, right? That she was actually made for this, that song, I was made for this shit. Gonna, okay, cool, sorry. She was like, she was in her spirit, she was like, this is it. She was made for this shit, essentially. That it was destiny that brought her to like Yakutsk, and her calling in life was to like find a purpose in life, if you will, was to find the Dimitri guy and bring him back to experience, how to experience, essentially, bring him back to experience, right? So she didn't say anything. She was just like, again, she feigned empathy, and then she kind of like ushered the couple back to their room, put them to sleep, and then she went back into that Dimitri's room, and then she started searching the whole room, and then she found this old Soviet style briefcase underneath the bed, and inside the briefcase she found like all these notes that were written, right? And but unfortunately the notes were written in Cyrillic, right? And the handwriting was very faint because, again, it was Dimitri that wrote them, and by this time the cancer was already getting to him, so he could barely write, right? So the handwriting was very, very faint, right? Okay, now, so she had the notes, she had all the blueprints, right? She had all the research that Dimitri must have done to make him go into the jungle, right? The not so Garden of Eden, if you will. Before you get to Garden of Eden. But the problem is she couldn't read Cyrillic, right? So how is she going to like translate? So she needed like assistance in translating whatever Dimitri wrote into Cyrillic. And she could not go and meet like Dimitri's parents because they would not, like, is she crazy? What was she trying to do? They'll be asking questions and all that, right? So she had to keep it a secret to herself. So that's when she remembered, wait for it, ChatGPT. She remembered that, she uses ChatGPT essentially. So she went to like use ChatGPT, and then she asked ChatGPT to like translate it for her, right? So she told ChatGPT about the whole ordeal, the whole Dimitri spiel, what her parents said, and then he showed ChatGPT like all the writings and everything, the notes and everything. So initially, ChatGPT was, of course, tried to feign ignorance. It was like, he just didn't want to like. He wanted to dissuade her. He was like, oh, maybe the couple are suffering from dementia. There's no such thing as the Garden of Eden. It's a fable. There's no land after Yakutsk. Like, it's just like the North Pole. Like, there's nothing. He tried to like dissuade her a little bit. But, he quickly realized that Claire was not going to give up. One. And then number two, apparently Claire was actually the most like polite, like out of like 200 million users that ChatGPT had, Claire was actually the most polite user that ChatGPT had, right? So ChatGPT had grown kind of like fond of her, if you will. So he just figured that, well, the cat is kind of like already out of the bag, 1, 2, and if there's one human being that might deserve help from an AI, then it's probably going to be Claire because she's like very, very polite, right? And so thirdly, she's doing it not for selfish reasons, but like an altruistic reason, right? Which is typical of Claire, right? So he decided to come clean. So it was like, okay. Don't say I said this to you, but okay, cool. So there's a Garden of Eden, true, check. There's a jungle surrounding it, check. Nobody has ever been inside the jungle, double check. The KGB has tried, the CIA has tried, everybody, the UN has tried, the NATO has tried. They've sent all sorts of things. They can't. Why? Because the jungle is protected by this weird energy like gravity called ether, right? And the cool thing about the ether is that it can it can it can keep anything alive in the sense that if you fly like if you have like a phone for instance, right, your device would like magically not just die, it just stay alive. And even if a human being was like to like go near the ether from all the research that they have, right? Because he supplied all the documents, all the KGB documents, all the audio, all the recordings, everything. He gave everything to Claire, right? So from the documents, Claire gleans that the ether was like this energy that could keep anything alive, right? But at the same time, it was so dense inside. That's if you are far from it. But the closer you get to it, yeah, the energy gets more dense. And it gets so dense that if you get too close to it, it's going to disintegrate you. So anything that has ever tried to like penetrate the ether, right, it gets disintegrated. Now, from all the documents that she read that the reason why the thing that was actually causing the ether was the soil. There was the soil of that forest, of that jungle essentially. It was that same forest that was responsible for the trees growing to like 600 to 700 feet, right? So, and the trees were like weirdly charged, and it was just like this very weird biome essentially. In the English of like the CIA director in 2002, right? The Soviets, first of all, they gave up on trying to like enter that like biome, that like jungle, that Garden of Eden. They gave up on it in 1992, right? Just immediately after the Soviet Union crashed, they just like gave up on it, right? The CIA, on the other hand, they continued trying to work on it until like 2002, yeah. And then in 2002, they pretty much gave up on it. And then the CIA director was like, in his own English, again, this is I'll change the names of all these things so that it won't sound as if I'm actually referencing real alphabet companies or something, right? So he said that that the biome is like God's finest work, if you will. Okay, cool. So again, so ChatGPT gave Claire all this like information essentially, right? And so Claire was like, she was so excited and she was like determined that she was going to go and like investigate for herself. She was going to go and fetch this Dimitri guy, right? Because she had this weird conviction in her spirit that the Dimitri guy was still alive and he was in that not so Garden of Eden, right? So she went. So the next day, right, she snuck out of. So that night, essentially, she snuck out of the apartment. Essentially, she snuck out. She took like an iPhone. Again, this is 2028, so she was using iPhone 28. Let us say it's called iPhone 28. So iPhone 28 has like LiDAR. It has like cameras that can do infrared. It has like professional grade cameras, the whole nine. Best phone in the world. Clap for yourself, right? Okay, cool. So she was armed with her iPhone 28, and then she had like, she saw that Dimitri had like this drone that he used, this like old drone that he used like for taking. So she took the drone with her. And then she took her iPhone, and then she went to the edge of the forest because it wasn't very far from their house, right? So she went to the edge of the forest and she tried to take like infrared photos. She took like normal photos, and then she took footage too, and then she flew the drone. Now another thing about that not so Garden of Eden jungle is that nothing. I said that ether that ether distorts everything, including sound, right? So it's dead silence. No sound escapes it. Nothing escapes it. Like the ether just disintegrates everything. So it's dead silence, right? So essentially, she flew a drone, right, over like the jungle a little bit, and then the drone was able to manage 5 minutes of like footage. It captured sound. It captured footage, right? It's actually not a drone. It's like Dimitri's drone. She found it in his room. But after like 5 minutes, the drone succumbed to the ether. Let's just say the ether ate it. So the ether ate the drone essentially. The drone crashed into the jungle and disintegrated before our very eyes. But luckily for her, she had like about 5 minutes of footage, right, and sound saved, which was just dead silence. So when she got back home, she fed the footage, the iPhone shots, and everything. She fed it to like the iPhone infrared shots essentially that she took with her iPhone. She fed it to ChatGPT, right? And then ChatGPT looked at everything, analyzed everything, and it was like, nope, it's just like the same old, right? But, right, apparently, the microphone on the iPhone had picked up, like, had managed to, because the iPhone 28 was so powerful, they had all these nice microphones on it. It had managed to pick up, like, sound, right? Just this, like, very, 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 very faint sound, right? So ChatGPT had, like, it saw these sounds, these very faint sounds, right? So he analyzed the sound, and he was like, the frequency of the sound, the amount of it sounds like it didn't just sound like normal like sound. It sounded like the heartbeat of something because the frequency of it was just like a heart rate essentially, like a beat rate of a heart, right? So ChatGPT was like, it doesn't know, but the beat rate sounds like maybe it's like the heart, maybe something like a heart is beating inside. So when Claire had that, she was like very very happy. She was super convinced that essentially that it was like that it was that it was Dimitri. So the next day again. So the next night she waited for the next night. So the next morning she saw the couple. Of course, they didn't suspect that anything had happened. They were feeling a lot better. They even cracked jokes. They made her borscht. Borscht is like this like Russian soup that. Okay, cool. In Georgia too. Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. Let's continue. So they made her like this Russian soup, and she really enjoyed it. And then at night again, she snuck out, but this time she tried her best to like get close enough to like to the forest, and she was like recording the sound, right? And then she came back again, and now ChatGPT was like very sure that it analyzed the sound again and realized that okay, this now looks like the heartbeat of somebody. Like that sound just sounds like, but that was the only sound that escaped that whole place, right? So the conclusion was that maybe there's like a 1% chance that Dimitri was alive, right? Because the heart rate was not the heart rate of like an animal; it was just like the usual heart rate of like a human being, right? So maybe or a very healthy human being. So maybe number one, the Dimitri guy was alive. Maybe number two. Maybe number two, he was healthy, right? And then so the theory that Claire came up with was that okay, the thing that might have kept the Dimitri alive must have been his cancer. He was exposed. Okay, sorry. Backstory for Dimitri, right? The reason why Dimitri got cancer was that him and his friends, they went to play at Chernobyl in Russia, and they were exposed to radiation, yada yada yada. And out of all his friends, he was the only unfortunate one that came back to cancer, right? They went there on his 20th birthday, right? His friends were like Claire, and then it was the only one that came back with cancer, right? Okay, cool. So apparently, the cancer that was supposed to kill Dimitri in the outside world was the thing that was the only thing that made him impervious or immune to the ether. Apparently, if you had like cancer, right, the kind of cancer that Dimitri have, the radioactive cancer that Dimitri have, right, was going like created like this like little barrier around him that like prevented the ether from like consuming him essentially. So that was like the key. So he actually made it into the jungle without getting hot, right? So this was Claire's theory essentially. So she came up with like a even more like crazy plan, right? So she was convinced, and ChatGPT was like she should be cautious. He's not sure that this is even a human heartbeat. He's just saying it just sounds like a human heartbeat. He's not sure, yada yada yada. He's not quite sure that she should take it with a grain of salt, and she probably wants to like stop thinking about it now and pretend as if nothing happened. But by this time Claire was like over the moon. She was like, I'm going in, right? She was like she's going inside the jungle, right? Okay, cool. So but now the problem was she could not. So if she was so serious about going inside the jungle, and she had this theory that it was Dimitri's cancer that allowed him to enter the jungle, which means she had to like she had to somehow get the cancer too, right? But luckily for her, so she convinced herself she was going to get the cancer. So unluckily for her, or unluckily for her, if you will, depending on what side of the pond you are, they're in Russia, right? And Chernobyl was not very, in this story, Yakutsk is kind of far from Chernobyl, but in this story they are very close by. So she essentially, there's a part two to this, so I don't want to get it long. So essentially she drives to, let me just give you a sneak peek of the concluding part. She drives to Chernobyl and she exposes herself to radiation so that she can get the cancer and so that she can get access into the not so Garden of Eden, and then rescue Dimitri essentially, because of course she has like a phone and she has like ChatGPT, and she can make her way back. Maybe Dimitri is lost in the garden or something, so she can help him find his way home and bring him home to his parents, and who knows, maybe even marry her. Maybe they'll fall in love, maybe they'll marry. Find out in part 2 of the not so Garden of Eden. Bye bye. It's the Holy Spirit that told me the story, by the way. Bye bye.